And this webinar is part of our continuing series on pandemic-specific issues designed as a free resource for our community. And today I'll be discussing tips for business networking and job hunting in a pandemic with serial tech entrepreneurs Debarshi Chaudhury and Greg Galant. Debarshi is the founder and CEO of Quantilus Innovation Inc., a software development company, and eNamix, a global staffing and recruitment firm. Greg is the CEO and co-founder of MuckRack, a PR software and journalism platform. He's also the co-creator and executive producer of the Shorty Awards, honoring the best of social media. So our goal this afternoon is to give you some tips for ways to make yourself visible to prospective employers, despite the challenges of the quarantine and social distancing, to give you some tips for getting and acing interviews, and how to tap into the unique opportunities presented by the pandemic to either find a job or build up your marketable skill set. And our discussion today is followed by Q&A, so please send us your questions using the chat feature, and we'll answer those after. All right, so let's begin by discussing the job market. What are the unique opportunities presented by the pandemic?
Want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think the one unique opportunity is really geography. I think for almost every candidate and job out there, in the pre-COVID era, you were restricted to places you lived in or places you were willing to move to. And that's really no longer the case. You can look for a job literally anywhere in the world, and that market is open to you. And it's analogous to, I guess, what we do as business owners, where finding a job is analogous to sales for a business in a sense, right? And that's the way I look at it. And that's what's opened up for us as business owners as well. We are no longer, not that we were restricted earlier to a large extent, but now it's become even more so, where geography is no longer a factor. I don't even need to travel somewhere to have a meeting where it was maybe expected 6 months ago. So even for you as a job seeker, it's the same dynamic, where you can expand your reach, look for jobs wherever, whenever, and there's no constraints around having to travel for interviews, having to meet people. You basically can put your best foot forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Greg, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think that's spot on advice, and we've even pre-COVID, our company was half remote, and we'd hire people all over the world. But when I would tell that to other CEOs, they'd look at me like I was crazy most of the time and thought we were doing things in a really weird way. And now that's the normal. Even Twitter announced that they're going to permanently let employees work from wherever they want. And more other companies are pushing it back. And I suspect some large portion of the economy, even post-COVID, will realize that remote work really works and let people work from anywhere. And in the meantime, be hiring people anywhere with the idea of maybe an eventual relocation. So yeah, huge opportunity there. The other thing I would add, and especially for people kind of just looking to break in, is that there's more of a premium placed on digital skills than ever before. So if you're coming out and you want to break into an industry, maybe you don't have that much knowledge about what that industry does, but if you're great at knowing digital tools, knowing how to use Slack and spreadsheets and automate features with Zapier, and understanding how CRMs work, or even how to edit an image, like just all the kind of digital tools that businesses need. Every business is struggling to get off paper. I was just talking to a real estate broker in Manhattan, and only now, decades into the digital revolution, only now are they going all digital. So just imagine all these businesses that are after dragging their feet for all these years, suddenly having to make everything digital. And there are a lot of people out there who are executives in companies who have no digital skills, and they really need new talent out there who can bring it.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, just a point on that to make is essentially for my software company, to Greg's point, we've really grown spectacularly in this COVID era because of what Greg just said. A lot of companies are just making that leap to digital and digital processes and digital systems, which they had been reluctant to do for cost reasons earlier. And what that emphasized is, yes, you really need to be focused on your, you don't have to be a software developer, but you need to focus on being tech savvy for any job, because that's, I mean, it was already important, but it's just become absolutely imperative in this environment.
Yeah, and that kind of segues to my next question for you both. Do you foresee certain sectors of the economy experiencing a boom in demand and employment as a result of the pandemic? And if so, which ones?
Technology for sure.
Well, the obvious answer, Zoom.
The obvious answer, right?
Yeah.
Those ones. I think a lot of stuff that goes around enabling technology at home. And this is also sort of a technology answer, but for instance, cybersecurity has become a lot more important for companies because, hey, everyone has company data in their home computers now, and now it becomes hacking has become so much easier in many cases, because I know the hackers no longer have to go to the computer to the enterprise network. They can actually just hack into home networks of their employees. There's a lot of home related work activities that have grown. I guess, Lisa, to your part, to your business, psychotherapy has obviously become more important. A lot of home support services around like delivering food, coffee at home has become much bigger. People are drinking a lot more coffee than they used to, instead of buying it outside. So I think it's just the dynamic of how people are behaving and following that and tracking that to make sure that to see where the businesses are going to evolve.
Okay. And would you say, I mean, I think it's understandably, job applicants are discouraged. I think recent college grads looking at this economic picture. Are employers hiring right now?
There are lots of jobs out there. You know, we're seeing, like Debarshi was saying, it's COVID caused a huge shift in consumer behavior. So on one hand, people have shifted away from a lot of things, and you know, it accelerated some trends, right? Like there was less and less of a need to go to the movies, for example, just because home entertainment systems were getting better and better. And then this, of course, you know, shifted people out of theaters altogether. But you know, it's a stretch to think we'll ever go back to where we were with theaters, because the trend was already going against going to the theaters. But then, you know, there are new things like, you know, Zoom, I'm sure, is hiring tremendously, but you know, Zoom's the poster child for it, but there are lots of companies that are growing. Salesforce, HubSpot, you know, pretty much any software as a service. If you look at, there's something called the Bessemer SaaS Index that shows you every public SaaS company, which means software as a service, like a Salesforce or HubSpot, Zoom, companies like that. And, you know, all those companies are outperforming the stock market, are growing quickly and actually posting good earnings and going up and up. So, you know, you have to think to yourself like, hey, what are going to be the big trends that will play out as a result of this? Those are sectors that are growing, that desperately need more people. And it's not just for your first job, but one thing that really struck me over the years is I saw like my friends who I started my career with, the ones who went to fast growing companies did a lot better in their career over time than the ones who went to mature but not growing companies.
Ah,
Because when you're at a growing company, it's just like, hey, anyone who's half competent, we have so many things to do, we're going to throw it at you. And if you don't really screw it up, you'll probably get promoted in a few years. Whereas if you're at the established company, you might be the best person there doing a great job, but you're not going to get promoted until somebody dies or retires and that next slot goes up. And it may never happen because they might be downsizing by then.
mhm.
So I've seen that. I've even seen smarter friends of mine do worse in their careers because they go to the company that's stagnant. So really encourage you to think, what's going to be a company in an industry you believe in and you think will grow over the next decade.
Yeah, and that really fits with what Sheryl Sandberg said before the pandemic, advising women in particular to be willing to take a step down, maybe take a less senior role in order to take a step forward and hitch yourself to a fast-growing company. That's more important than making a lateral move. Would you agree with that?
Well, there's a great story I heard from a friend of mine who's a bit older than me, and he graduated and got his MBA at Stanford. I think it was around when I was graduating college, I guess in like 04, 05. And at the time when he was, so Stanford MBA, super prestigious thing in the Valley, he was telling me like all the smartest kids in his class at Stanford got the good jobs at the dominant internet company at the time, Yahoo. And the bottom of the class that got rejected from Yahoo had to take the crappy jobs at this up and coming company called Google. So of course, the bottom of the class got a lot richer than the top of the class because, we all know the story of what happened to Google and, the rocket ship that was, and anyone who got, even an intern who got stock grants at that time did great. And, I'm sure most of them got lots of promotions. And the Yahoo people, got screwed on their options and, didn't get that many personal growth opportunities. So I think 100% it's like jump on the rocket ship.
Yes.
Because you have to care where you're going. It doesn't really matter what your seat on the rocket ship is, just so long as you're on it.
All right.
So actually, story related to that. I think the richest friend that I have is his career path has been, and it's big to Greg, your Yahoo story. He started with Yahoo and then jumped on LinkedIn, and as LinkedIn was sort of stabilizing, jumped on Uber, was the head of developer at Uber, and then right as Uber started dipping in the news, switched from Uber to a company called, it's a Kafka-based company, but so essentially he got out at the top of all of these fast-growing firms right at the moment when it was the best time to get out. That's, I would suggest, as Greg said, I mean, if a growing company is really the best place to be for any career. And I would also say, I mean, obviously we've been using all these technology examples. And I'd like to reiterate, I mean, it's not, you don't have to be a technologist to be at these companies. There's a whole host of jobs at these companies around content creation, around support, customer service. There's like entry-level jobs which are absolutely not tech jobs. You do have to be tech savvy, but they're not just hiring software engineers out of college. They're hiring a wide breadth of people. They need accountants, they need lawyers, they need basically the whole gamut of what goes into a company.
Well said, yeah. And at our software company, it's over half of our staff are non-engineers, and unfortunately, we need lawyers too.
Always need lawyers. So let's shift gears a little and talk about virtual networking, right? So I've identified the rocket ship I want to be a part of. What are some of your top tips for me making myself visible to a prospective employer there?
Well, I would say most companies have recruiters and network with the recruiters. If you can find recruiters for a company, recruiters are much easier to get a hold of, and they will respond to you on LinkedIn and on other sources than, let's say, the senior VP of a company who will most probably ignore anything you send to them. So remember, recruiters are always the first gateway to any company. And if you get on their good side, they'll try to find you at least interviews. So absolutely try to find recruiters for companies and connect with them on social media, connect with them by email, send them nice notes. Doesn't hurt to just build a relationship. And essentially treat it again as you're selling yourself effectively, right? In the marketplace of jobs, you're basically want to put the best image of yourself out there. Recruiters themselves have a network. They're all connected to each other. So if and they move from company to company. So if you establish a good relationship with a recruiter at a growing company, and maybe you don't get a job there, the next time they move to a different company, you're still in their books, and you can absolutely take it from there.
Would you be able to identify recruiters on LinkedIn if you're a recent college grad?
Absolutely. So if you know the companies you're looking at, just search for the company, find employees of that company. The recruiters definitely on LinkedIn. I mean, if they're not, then they're not doing their job. Yeah, and their profile will say either talent acquisition or recruitment, one of those titles around that. So recruiters are the easiest people to find because that's their job. They want to be found.
Yeah, LinkedIn has an advanced, when you click on search, click on advanced search, and you can specify the company and the job title. So you could say company, Zoom, job title, recruiter, and it will just right there show you the recruiters at Zoom.
Okay, and obviously a LinkedIn profile is important. Any tips for LinkedIn profiles?
Professionally, absolutely. I think LinkedIn has become one of the key places where recruiters look for candidates. So yes, the LinkedIn profile is important, just as any social media. I mean, and I guess I'd also put in a warning there. Recruiters are going to look at your social media. So if there's anything out there, not just on LinkedIn, they're going to search for what's on Twitter. They're going to search for what's on Instagram.
TikTok too.
TikTok as well, absolutely. So what I recommend to people is generally to have like a professional profile and a personal profile, and to keep the personal profile as private as possible within your network. And the professional profile should obviously be about your profession, and the best foot you can put forward is really just trying to show yourself as project yourself as a person interested in growing trends in whatever job you're looking for, right? Look for content out there that other people are posting about your profession. And if it's interesting, repost it. That's fine. You don't have to create content on your own, but if you just read stuff and repost it, that's also okay. So when a recruiter looks at your Twitter profile, let's say, or your Facebook, not Facebook, but really LinkedIn profile, and they see a stream of stuff about your profession that is relevant and makes it look like you are actually interested in the profession and your content, then that's a huge plus.
Greg, do you have anything to add about the use of social media platforms, maybe other than LinkedIn, or talk about LinkedIn?
Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, everything Debarshi said spot on. You should also put some thought and work into your profile photo. Maybe get your best friend or your friend who's the best at taking photos nearby. Take a photo of you. Make sure they bring their zoom lens so you can be 6 feet apart during the photo shoot. Do it outdoors. Make sure you get great lighting. All those basics. There's lots of blog posts on how to make sure you get a great professional photo. And then, another thing is like learn the jargon in the industry you want to go for. Like if you want to go into human relations, for example, But a lot of tech companies, including ours, that's now called people operations, people ops. So like learn that stuff, put in your profile. Same if you want to be servicing customers, that's now called customer success. Nobody called it that 10 years ago. Your professors might not even know that term, but and it's the same in every profession. There's always new terminology, so read up on it. Make sure you put that in your resume, because a lot of times, both on LinkedIn and your resumes, it'll get searched by automated tools looking for keywords. So if you're not matching those keywords, you won't even come up or get considered. And then I think the point about other social networks is good too. Depending on where you're going or what industry you want to be in, it might matter. If you want to be a journalist, you should really have a Twitter presence. Again, you want to be thoughtful about what you put on there. You don't just want to tweet every last thought, but that's an industry that cares a lot about Twitter. If you want to be a programmer, they care a lot about GitHub, maybe even more than LinkedIn. So there you have to really make sure that you have a great GitHub profile and you've contributed to open source projects. If you want to be a designer, you might want to be on Behance, which is a social network for designers that lets you post your work, or even just have a really nice personal website with your portfolio, and on and on. So you have to really understand the dynamics of the industry you want to get into. And also, look at your heroes. If you want to, if you can find the people who have the jobs that you want, or the people who have the jobs you want to have in 2 years, check out what social networks they're on and how they're using them.
Do you recommend setting up virtual networking informational meetings? That was a strategy I think many people used before COVID. What are your thoughts about that?
You mean setting it up personally or just attending them?
Just trying to set up virtual informational meetings. So I don't have a job interview, but I'm reaching out maybe to alumni from my college or in the field I want to go into, and setting up a virtual informational meeting.
I think it would be useful if you can get people to attend. I think that's really the key. If you do have a network of a large enough network where you can set this up and get enough people interested to attend, then sure, yeah. I mean, the more face time you get with relevant people, the better it is. So it might not just have, it might have to be something more than, hey, let's all come and meet. If it's about a specific topic.
Well, I believe the question is about is it about one-on-one meetings?
Yes.
Oh, one-on-one. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Like informational interviews, right?
Right. Oh yeah, I thought it was group meetings. One-on-one, sure. I mean, again, absolutely. The more you get face time with people, the better it is. I mean, any time you spend networking is eventually probably going to have some return on investment.
Actually, I think it's actually a particularly good time to be doing it, because you used to have to compete with people's travel schedules. So like, just to give you a window into my life, like I used to spend at least 1 week a week traveling, and I'd often be in a different time zone. So I wasn't keen to take any meetings virtual or otherwise. And then even when I was in New York, I'd be running around, going to Midtown, going to meetings, losing all this time, just going through security, meeting with customers. Now that's all blown up. So I actually have more time than I've ever had to do Zooms and stuff like that. So I think you have a unique opportunity to catch people. Also, it used to be kind of weird to get on a video call with someone. Like if you emailed somebody 5 months ago and you were like, can we have a video chat? A lot of people would be like, wait, a video chat? What, Zoom? Or do I have to get on Skype now? And maybe they didn't have a headphone or a good webcam. Now it's standard. So it's a great advantage, going back to what Debarshi said at the top about geography, where if you wanted to break into an industry where most of the people in New York and you're off, in Texas currently, in January, you could have only gotten a phone call. Now you can get on a video call, which is much higher fidelity. So I think it's a great time. The one kind of caution I'd have for this and everything else is I heard this great rule about email, which is the time you put into drafting an email is directly correlated with your chances of a response.
Huh.
So And that doesn't mean that the email has to be long. It just means the email has to be customized. So if you just send out an email to a bunch of people and you're like, hey, it looks like you have an awesome job. Can I talk to you about it? Probably not going to get a response. But if you look, if you spend all this time on your LinkedIn, you say, hey, I see, we went to the same school. And not only that, when you were at school, turns out you majored in the same thing as me, or you were in the same activity that I was. And I saw on Twitter, you're also into cycling and I'm into cycling. And I really want to break into this industry. I just want 15 minutes of your time because I want to learn about, this, that, and that dynamic of your job. When someone gets an email like that, they know that you've spent probably 20 minutes researching them, and there's just a human societal feeling of reciprocity where if I know someone spent 20 minutes researching me, I feel like I owe it to them to write back and perhaps give them some time for a Zoom. Whereas I get so many emails every day that are just obvious they went to me and 100 other people with no edits aside from maybe the first name field. And I feel no obligation to respond to those because I know they didn't spend any time drafting them to me. So I think that being really thoughtful, putting yourself in the other person's shoes and think like, what would make me want to respond to it, will actually give you the return and will up your response rate.
Okay, great. My next question is about getting interviews. All right, so candidates are conducting informational interviews, but they actually want to be invited to interview for a bona fide position. What are your tips for that? Top tips for getting interviews. Debarshi.
I think going back to the recruiter, really make friends with your recruiters. that's the top tip. Also, and maybe Greg could talk a little bit more about this, but the effectiveness of videos, especially in marketing, is videos are a lot more effective than the written word. So having a video introduction of yourself that you can share around would be, I think, really useful, and also make you stand out from the crowd to some extent. I think essentially recruiters need something more than just the resume to go by, because resumes have keywords, and that's a bare minimum you need to have. Of course, I mean, if there's a job description, your resume needs to fit that job description, but you need something more to stand out so that the recruiter can take your profile and put it in front of the person who's actually making the decision, and that's really the interview. So and really, from a resume, the recruiter has no idea what you really like, right? In terms of personality, in terms of, well, can you even speak? So if you can create like a short 1-minute introduction video of yourself that you can pass along with your resume, I think that will be really useful, because then the recruiter has some confidence that they're not wasting their time by putting it in front of the hiring person.
And in terms of the content, Debarshi, highlighting your skill set and your interests, what would you recommend? Yeah,
essentially, it's just think of it as an executive summary for yourself, right? Okay, this is who I am. I've worked in these jobs in the past. This has been my education. These are the skills I bring to the table, my abilities, and I'd be a really great asset to your company. To Greg's point, if you can even personalize it to the company to some extent, that'll be even better. But of course, then you have to make a separate video for each application. If you want to put in the time, that's obviously great. But otherwise, it can be just about yourself.
Greg?
And one thing I would add too, yeah, if you have built a relationship with somebody at the company, let's say through an informational interview, you could send them a follow-up email and be like, hey, it was so great talking to you. I looked on your website. I saw there's X position open, like link to it, because a lot of times at a big company, people don't even know what position's open. And be like, how would you recommend I apply? And that could be really powerful. You're doing the work for them because you've figured out what the open position is. And I've seen that myself where like earlier this year, we were hiring, and apologies for the fire truck that's riding by right now. earlier this year, we had a bunch of open positions, and so sometimes you would email me. They'd get a warm intro to me, and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, I'd love to work at your company," but they're not telling me what job they want. So I'm like, "Oh, now I gotta do the work to look at their resume and try to figure out what job they want and check with the different department heads who are doing the hiring and say, does this person look right?" Versus when somebody would email me and be like, "Oh, hey, I love your company. I saw you have X position open. How should I go about applying?" Now I know, like, they know what they want. I can forward it to that department head, make an intro right there, tell them to apply through the site, and I'll tell the department head to look out for them. Also, at big companies, they often give referral bonuses to people who refer you in. So it might be that even if you talk to someone mid-level at that company, or maybe even you talk to an alumni who's only been there for a year or two, and maybe it was even a friend of yours who graduated a year or two ahead, it might be very much in their interest to refer you because they'll get cash if you get hired. And guess what? They know they're going to get a check if you get hired. They're going to do everything they can to get you hired so they can then give you some tips on how to interview at that company and follow up with the recruiter and be like, "Oh, whatever happened with this person that I referred you?" So, again, just try to work it from all angles. I think that, sometimes reaching out to the recruiter is awesome. If you do have the connection, just, make it easy for them to help you by finding the job and asking them to, how you should go about applying to that job.
All right, so do all the legwork. As we would say in DBT, it's very reinforcing, right? Making it easy for them. So let's fast forward now to the actual interview, and I'm assuming all the interviews you're conducting currently are virtual. Tips for standing out, including home run questions for the interviewer.
Well, the first interview, and this is probably a little bit self-serving, but the first interview that you'll probably have in the next 3 to 4 years will almost always be with a machine, whether it's a phone interview or a video interview. But then the second interview will probably be with a recruiter. The third interview will be with somebody who's actually looking to hire. So each of these interviews has to be played a little bit differently from my experience. When you're talking to a recruiter, you're really trying to make the case for why they should put you forward for the job, not necessarily why you should get hired. In a sense, I mean, there's a subtle difference there. It's like you're really making the case for effectively, essentially, the recruiter's compensation, the recruiter's growth is linked to finding the right candidates. And when they don't find the right candidates, they get dinged. So effectively, you're basically making a case to that you'll be a good candidate at the real interview. Then when you're at the real interview, that's when you talk about your skills and your abilities and so on. In terms of the interview itself, especially given the current scenario where everyone's online and doing it virtually, I would just say treat it like a real interview. Just because you're virtual doesn't mean it's any less real. I mean, you still have to dress appropriately. You still have to make sure you're presenting yourself as a professional, and also make sure you're in a location which has good lighting, where you're visible, where you have good Wi-Fi connection, a good webcam. Because again, these little things matter. If I'm in an interview and I can't hear the person properly or see the person properly, even though it might not be that person's fault necessarily, it just leaves me with a bad taste in the mouth at the end of it, where I feel, hey, that interview didn't go really well, even though the answers might have been perfectly fine. But yeah, it's just the overall impression that I leave with. So at the end of the interview, or at least for my interviews, I might not remember the exact answers that a person gave to all of my questions, but I leave with an impression, right? right? I leave it, hey, a positive impression of the person or a negative impression of the person. And I think the technology environment that you're in is key to that in this era where it's all on technology. So if if I can't see you properly or can't hear you properly, that's not going to work.
Okay. Greg, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, adding on to that, I think that's a great point. It's great to use natural light. So myself, I'll show you behind the scenes. I position my desk next to the windows in my apartment, so I get the natural light. If I position my computer so that the windows were behind me, then I'd be backlit. Or if I positioned it, or easier in the house, so you should play around with where you are and see how it looks. Natural light's the best. You can also buy a ring light if you don't already have one for your vlogging, but you can buy a ring light for like 30 bucks on Amazon. And I did that for when I do after hour Zooms with people, which is powerful. You can also buy, you should think a lot about the audio. The audio probably matters even more. So if you're in a very quiet place, you might be able to get away with your computer mic. And if you're confident, no one you live with is going to walk in on you. Instead, I got this noise canceling mic. I think it's about 70, 80 bucks. There are cheaper ones out there. This Jabra one is really good. And I like it because I'll leave my windows open here in Manhattan, and short of a fire truck like before, does a great job of canceling out any other noise, and I don't have to worry about noise. There's also nothing worse than like when you hear someone's text message or something pop up on their computer. So if you have noise canceling mic, it's more likely to cut that out. And then I'd also encourage you, in a way, it's like a great advantage with this video because you can really control your environment versus you walk into a recruiter's office, maybe you'd practice, but I remember when I was first starting my career, I went for I think it was a job interview for an internship, and the person was very obnoxious where they were at their desk and they invited me to sit on the couch about 15 feet away from them in their office. It's a very weird dynamic and hard to keep on top of. Whereas now I know any meeting I go into, like, this is my world. I can control it how I want. So, there's really no excuse for you not to have like spent some time, figure out where's the best place in your room to position yourself, the best mic. You could also try recording yourself and playing yourself back to get great tips. If you're on a Mac, you can do that with QuickTime and just record yourself and see how it looks. Try it out with different mics, different positions, or just hop on a Zoom with a friend and ask your friend to critique you. I've done that a few times where I thought I had to record a video for our virtual award show earlier on, and there I wanted to make it look more professional than this. So I set up my camera and I pre-recorded it, sent it to a friend of mine, and he told me it sucked, that my delivery wasn't, I didn't quite get the right delivery on it, and the lighting wasn't quite right. And so I shot it again, and the second time was a lot better after I got that feedback. So I was glad I didn't just go with my first take.
Right. So above and beyond the technological issues, do you guys recommend writing out talking points, things you definitely want to convey during the course of the interview so you can stay on message? Is there anything you definitively don't want to say to a prospective employer?
Don't tell them how you sued your last employer.
Okay.
No, I mean, generally, without being suspicious, talking points are obviously great for almost any call. I mean, I have talking points for this call, so yes, it's and even better in a Zoom interview, you can literally have your Zoom window and your talking points open on your computer in front of you. So you don't give the impression that you're looking down at stuff and referring to notes while in the middle of a conversation. And that's an advantage you have over pre-COVID, where if you're meeting someone, you really can't look up your notes while you're face to face with someone. So talking points, I think, are absolutely make sure you highlight your best, the best points about you, really your achievements. I think that's something everyone's looking for. Obviously, the things you think you're really good at, make sure that comes across in the interview. Uh, Control the interview. I mean, really, that's the key. Effectively, whatever the question, and this is something that I advise everyone who talks about interviews, is whatever the question, try to lead it to something great that you've done in the past. Right? It's really just segue into that topic, because that's really what puts you in control of the interview, and instead of the interviewer. And that really is what you want to get across in the interview anyway. Is okay, this is one great thing that I did, and let me tell you all about it. So yeah, I think that's really key.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think like Debarshi said, it's the best time ever, right? You can have your cheat notes right in front of you. And I think Debarshi's point about putting it on the screen is really good. And what I'll even do, and I do talking points. I mean, I'm not looking for a job, obviously, but I have tough conversations with people on my team or partnerships I'm trying to land. I'll go into it with talking points. And I have two monitors, but I will still put the talking points on the monitor, on my smaller monitor, the laptop monitor, so I'm maintaining eye contact and not going like this the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I would make sure that they're truly talking points and not scripts, because people can tell when you go to a script. So you just want to remind yourself, tell the story about X, tell the story about Y. And in terms of what you shouldn't talk about,
Yeah.
there's really one, I think you could talk about a lot. I know when I'm interviewing people, like, and you've interviewed 7 people in a day, it gets boring. And, I do want to hear about like some interesting hobby of yours, or maybe a trip. Like, give me something so I don't just get bored out of my mind and I remember you. So you don't have to be too robotic and just be like, I've had these 3 jobs and I'm on a mission to have your job. The one thing I would always stay away from is bad mouthing former employers or internships or anywhere else you've worked before.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get asked the question because someone will go through your resume. And I know if I see someone's at any company for less than 2 years, I mean, if you're straight out of college and you just had internships, that's another story. But if you're 5 years out and I see you were 1 year here, 1 year there, I want to know why. But I also really want to hear you like take ownership and have self-reflection for why it wasn't a good fit for you and how you grew out of it and what you learned, versus when a candidate just goes into a mode like, oh, it turns out it was awful there and they didn't know what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you kind of wonder, like, is it you or them? And I've interviewed candidates where they've been 5 different places 1 year each, and something was wrong with all 5 of those places. And maybe they're right, but I just got to think, what are the chances that they happen to find 5 companies that were all awful versus maybe they were the problem?
Well,
So,
yeah, Greg, a related thing on that notorious question that I've been asked when I was interviewing: what is your greatest weakness? They ask you your greatest strength and your weakness. Weaknesses that are kosher and weaknesses you should probably not share.
I always hated that question.
Yeah.
I try to never ask it. So I don't know that I'm the best person, although we do make PR software. So I very familiar with spin, and I think I think so long, I think it's less about, I mean, I think you don't want to choose total bullshit. Like, oh, I worked too hard, I'm too dedicated.
I'm too obsessed.
Yeah,
I'm a perfectionist. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think I think it's another area where you could use it to tell a story. Like, hey, I walked into my last job, I wasn't that, when I began, I wasn't that strong at public speaking, and I joined Toastmasters, and now I can be now I'm doing public speaking all the time, and I still feel I have room to grow. Something like that, where
Mm-hmm.
you're showing self-reflection and a little bit of vulnerability, but you're not just being like, oh, I totally suck at public speaking. Just hire me, but just never put me in front of a crowd.
Right. I think that's key. I think just take an aspect of your personality that is not good or bad, and show how you're trying to improve that. That's really, let's say you're an introvert and and that's not necessarily a negative thing. A lot of jobs love introverts, and you're great at your job, but you could say that, hey, I'm an introvert, but I would like to become more of an extrovert and interact more with people, and that's where I would want to improve as I go along. And that becomes a negative, but it's also a positive, because I get the feeling that you're trying to expand yourself, right? And you're trying to become better at something that you think is a negative. So I think that's really key. Whatever you put out as a negative, uh, also have also show a willingness to make it better at the same time, right? And that's really what really puts a positive spin on it, more than just saying, yeah, I suck at this.
Okay. And the last topic I wanted to hit on was your thoughts on, I know some recent grads and people who've decided to go back to school, sit out COVID, build up a marketable skill set, and then reemerge in a year or 2 years. And what, provided that's financially feasible for that person, what are your thoughts about that and other ways to build up your skill set during this period?
I can go. So I would say great idea as long as you're building the right skill set, right? I mean, I think education is always a good thing. But yeah, make sure this goes back to the first question we talked about, which is where are the growth areas, right, that we can project. So look at what the industry is saying, look at where the market is headed, and then do an analysis of, well, where will it be 2 years from now? Obviously, Greg and I are both technology people, so and that's where our heads at and my head's at. That's definitely a growth area, and it's not going anywhere. But whatever your profession, make it so that you can figure out where the trends are, and make sure whatever education you're getting is following those trends. Also, I would highly recommend eventually doing something cheap, in the sense that there's look at the return on investment of of whatever you're getting into, right? If you're blowing a lot of money, getting into a huge amount of debt to get that education, then and at the end of it, we don't really know what the market's going to be like 2 years from now. Maybe everything becomes sort of a global marketplace where you no longer nobody commands the salaries that they're commanding right now, and then you're stuck with that debt. So yeah, it's an interesting calculation that I think everyone would have to do at their personal level.
Yeah, to manage the risk, the financial risk.
And there's also a lot of free resources out there now. Just to plug our own thing, we just launched, if you want to get into public relations, MuckRack, which is a public relations software platform. We launched a free course at academy.muckrack.com, one course on the fundamentals of media relations, reaching out to journalists, another one on the fundamentals of social media and how to optimize your social media for a career. And Google just earlier this week announced a free certification on data science. I believe Salesforce and HubSpot have certifications if you want to go into the world of sales operations or managing CRM. And there's a lot of stuff out there. So, you could think about that either. It's a possible alternative. I mean, these are smaller courses, but together, might be an alternative to an expensive paid course. Mm-hmm. Or even if you decide you're going to do online education with the university, you'll learn fundamentals with the university, but they might not be as direct. So if you're going to even if you're going to Harvard Business School for marketing, it might still pay to get certified in Salesforce or HubSpot, and then you can go to the company and be like, hey, look, not only do I have the general principles, but I know you use Salesforce and I'm an expert at using Salesforce, so I can hit the ground running.
So I was talking to an educational consultant who's recommending to her clients, and these are high school students, unpaid internships as ways to build their resume. What do you think of that strategy? Again, provided it's financially feasible for prospective job applicants. Is that an option right now? Would there be, would employers be receptive to that?
Well, the thing about unpaid internships is legally, if it's unpaid, then the employer cannot ask you to do anything useful, really. So, I mean, that's technically the reason it's unpaid, because if you're actually creating economic value, then the employer has to pay you. So with that said, most unpaid internships turn out to be not very useful,
Okay.
quite frankly. But if it's a paid internship and you're getting your feet in the water, absolutely. Again, most employers are looking at internships as a pipeline for qualified candidates. So if I have somebody working as an intern in my company, they already know my systems, they know the people, they know the processes. And so making them a permanent employee after 3 months or 6 months is so much easier. I don't have to pay a recruiter. I don't have to do anything. And I mean, that's just an easy transition. So yes, I mean, given the alternative, I would definitely say an internship, as long as it's paid, absolutely go for it.
Yeah, I'd agree. And yeah, as an employer, like we would never take an unpaid intern unless it were through a university that was compensating the student, for two reasons. One, there's huge legal risk, even if the unpaid intern wants to do it. There have been plenty of cases where employers take on unpaid interns, only have a class action lawsuit against them later from those unpaid interns. And two, there's a lot of ethical arguments against unpaid internships now, specifically that it disadvantages minorities or the underprivileged because they can't afford to take it. So a lot of employers, a lot of employers already moved away from the legal risk, but they're getting away from it because of that, not feeling comfortable with the ethical situation. So, maybe there's some small business out there that's desperate and will take you on as an unpaid intern, but that's probably not where the great opportunities are. Probably any company that's buttoned up would not take a unpaid internship. So go for the money.
Okay. So I want to open it up to questions to people who've been listening. And so do you guys have questions for Greg or Debarshi? You can either just send them to us in chat, or I can unmute you. Yes, Emily, just a sec. Can you unmute?
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Hey, oh, this is so awesome. It's great to meet you. Thank you for your time. So I guess I have kind of a strange question, and it might be a little very specific to my situation, but this is an opportunity to ask you it. I have been using the pandemic as a time to transition. I've been a musician for 10 years, a touring musician. Obviously, the pandemic, as for many people, has been a moment to sort of pause. And I am interested in looking at schools and different things, but I was wondering what skill sets, like entry-level skill sets, would be important. And like, it was helpful when you listed the courses and different certificates, but different programs that are, again, entry-level. Like, it's not like I have a background in a lot of very complicated programming or anything, but just things that, you would like to see.
Well, what kind of job do you want to get? Because the answer would really depend. Do you want to be a programmer? Do you want to be a marketer?
I think probably more for marketing.
Yeah, well, I could tell you in marketing, I'm in the marketing department and have seen a lot of it. And even within marketing, there's a ton of different things. There are people who, are more like production, where like produce a webinar and make graphics for our blog posts and write. There are other people in our marketing department who spend their whole day with spreadsheets running programmatic ads. So, you know, there's a lot of literature on that, and that you can find, like HubSpot has a lot of good blogs out there on it. You can actually look at the jobs that are out there. I'd say if you're coming from being a musician, you know, I would really think about how you spin that and what skills you have that apply. Because if you were touring, I don't know how much you were involved in it, but there's probably a level of production, right? You had to figure out how to get the equipment set up. You had to promote your band. You had to make a logo. You had to connect with your audience. I mean, that's stuff businesses need. So I think A, how do you position that for them? You know, B, how do you sharpen your skills there? And then I think also, you know, in that area, we always love to see portfolios, what people have done. So when we're hiring for a marketing role, you know, we'd want to check out, and we wanted to see you have like an awesome LinkedIn and Twitter and professional online presence. We want to see that you can write well and that you have blog posts out there. We want to see graphics that you've made totally on your own, even if it's using Canva, but Photoshop's even better. You know, and just seeing like all those skills, like, oh, this person can come in and actually do useful work for us day one, or save us money, not having to outsource it to freelancers anymore.
Yeah. All right.
I think
awesome.
marketing content is a big deal. I mean, we spend a lot of money on marketing, just creating content and creating videos, creating ads, and the like. So if we can move a bunch of that off in-house, that would be a huge saving. In terms of just courses, I think there's a bunch of sites out there. We use a lot of a site called Coursera, and then a site called Udemy. Yeah, you can either get a subscription on those. It's not very expensive, but there's a lot of good content out there which is very cheap. You can definitely pick up a lot of stuff there.
One good person to check out is Derek Sivers. I used to do a podcast and I interviewed him. He was a former musician, then he started a company called CD Baby, which back when people used CDs was the #1 way to distribute CDs, and ended up selling it for like 30 million, did extremely well. But he's written a lot about like the skills he grew as a musician that then helped him in business and to market his business and scale it.
Okay. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Any other questions? No? Oh, wait.
I see
like
one in
the chat.
Yeah, okay. Can you guys see that? Good. And
so basically you want to start your own business based on what they learned, or, you know, based on what they've done as a school counselor. So advice is on starting a business.
I think this is for you, Lisa.
Do we have another 5 hours?
advice on starting a business, a private practice.
Particularly a therapy practice. So go for it.
Oh, I think I should answer this question.
Yes.
But feel free to jump in. Yes. So I had started mine by working for an established, sometimes it's easier to work for an established practice and develop referral networks rather than just launching on your own. That's just my point of view. And I think now launching remotely, I mean, given the time frame 2 to 3 years, hopefully we won't be remote then. It might be challenging in the current climate to just launch and get referrals. Having said that, there are a lot of companies that generate referrals for mental health practitioners that you can subscribe to. And I don't participate in those, but I think they've made it easier to do that. And, you know, your website presence is important. Developing and networking with other mental health professionals, and you have an area of expertise, let's say that I don't have, I would refer to you. I was the membership chair of NYC CBT for a while, and that was definitely helpful when I was launching my private practice, just getting to know all the other psychologists and social workers in New York City. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer that in greater detail if you want to email me later. Any other? Yes, you're very welcome. Okay. Any other questions? All right. So parting words of advice to recent grads entering the job market now. What would you guys say, Debarshi?
Well, I would just say, yeah, treat it as essentially you're marketing yourself, you're selling yourself, treat it as such, put your best foot forward. It's essentially your first job will stick with you forever in most cases, if that's the career you're in. So make sure you're not blowing a chance, not to put too much pressure on it. There's also on the flip side, there's lots of companies out there. There's lots of companies that are growing out there. So don't get discouraged if you don't get a hit the first time or the second time or the third time. I mean, people are looking for good candidates. That's always the case. Even if I don't have a job posted, if I find a great software programmer, I will hire that person because I'll make a job for that person. So that's really true for most companies, I feel, and most business owners that I speak to are the same way. If you find somebody who's really good at what they do and has the right attitude, we'll make a job for them because they'll pay for it eventually. And that's what I think you should try to come across as the person who can make things happen for my company. That's really my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. And that really offsets this perception that things have drastically changed. There are no jobs. So thank you for that. Greg, what are your parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think it's an exciting time to be, be in the job market. It's definitely a challenge, but there's, I think, so many opportunities out there with geography being opened up, as Debarshi mentioned, the new skill sets that are needed. I mean, just the fact that you all were able to find this opportunity to join us, and we're willing to spend an hour of your day watching us when you could be watching amazing programming from Netflix, Amazon, and now iTunes, shows that you are dedicated to your career and probably in the top 1%. And remember, there are lots of other people looking. Most other people are sending really crappy job applications and emails and not putting thought into it. So, I think if you're out there and you're really being thoughtful, you're putting the time into finding a job, you're learning new skills every day, there's nothing that can stop you.
Yes, and thank you everyone who registered and showed up today to listen to us. And thank you so much, Debarshi and Greg, for your tips. And hopefully this was helpful.
Thanks, Lisa. Honored to be invited.
Yes.
Absolutely. That was great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.